Everything started as a game. Brandon Lancaster, young CEO, heir to a billion-dollar empire, took a reckless bet, one blind date. One ordinary girl from a grocery store, but she didn't play by his rules, and by the time he realized, it wasn't just his heart on the line, it was everything. The rooftop of Lancaster Enterprises wasn't just a terrace. It was a private kingdom floating above Manhattan. An infinita pool stretched toward the skyline, its water mirroring the cloudless blue overhead. Lounge chairs lined the deck like thrones, and from them echoed the laughter of men who had never known consequences. Champagne chilled in crystal buckets. Music pulsed low beneath the sound of jets overhead. Models tanned, toned, and stunning lounged in designer swimsuits, their laughter light, practiced, and bored. At the center of it all sat Brandon Lancaster, heir to a billion-dollar empire, slouched in a white linen shirt unbuttoned to the chest, sunglasses shielding eyes that rarely betrayed anything real. A glass of single malt hung lazily between his fingers. "So, Bran," Cole Harrington grinned, motioning to one of the girls adjusting her bikini strap beside the pool. "You finally added a Victoria's Secret angel to your collection, huh?" Nathan whistled. "Damn, Brandon. What's next? A duchess or one of the Princess of Spain?" Brandon didn't even glance at the model. He brought the glass to his lips, took a slow sip, and said, "Yeah, she was beautiful, but boring." The guys groaned in unison. "Of course she was," Cole muttered, rolling his eyes. "Because only you could find a supermodel disappointing. I'm just saying," Brandon shrugged. "If I ever host a lingerie runway show up here, maybe I'll actually be entertained." Nathan burst out laughing. "Bro, that's actually a sick idea." "Yeah, right," Cole said. "We'd need to get your dad out of the country for a month." The mention of Robert Lancaster, the real king behind the curtain, cast a brief shadow. Brandon's jaw ticked just slightly. "Relax," Brandon said, voice smooth. "He's in Tokyo until next week. As far as he knows, I'm burning through Q for projections." In truth, this wasn't the first time Brandon turned his father's empire into a playground. The terrace, designed for executive retreats and shareholder dinners, had become his private escape. Hosting private parties here during business hours was his favorite passive rebellion. If Robert Lancaster was cold, controlling, and obsessed with image, Brandon played the opposite: casual, chaotic, unapologetically excessive. And yet, beneath all that noise, something inside him stayed. Restless. "All right, guys." Nathan clapped his hands. "New challenge. We need something harder." "Yeah," Cole chimed in. "Because clearly, Brandon is bored of perfection. Let's give him imperfection." Nathan smirked. "We're overdue anyway," Cole added. "Darren still hasn't recovered from the homeless dare," Brandon chuckled. "Didn't he last like 10 minutes? "Less," Nathan smirked. Soon as a rat crossed his foot, he panicked and gave up. Lost the Bugatti for a whole week. They all laughed. It was cruel but expected. Losing wasn't just about pride, it cost you. Brandon raised a brow. "Define your terms." Cole leaned forward, suddenly energized. 1 hour. With someone. Painfully average. Not a model. Not rich. Just some random, even a broke girl. Like grocery store broke. Nathan added with a laugh. "You have to spend an hour with her." Cole continued. "No walking out. No money tricks. And more, you have to sleep with her." "Really?" Brandon tilted his head, amused. "That's the challenge." Cole grinned. "If you succeed, we'll fund your Monaco trip. First class, yacht, the whole thing," Nathan added. "But if you fail, You give me your Aventador for a week. Brandon smirked. That's it. You're not making this hard. I should have suggested the lingerie runway that would have taken effort. Cole laughed. Brandon, my guy, I love you, but getting you to spend a whole hour with a regular girl might be your Everest. Brandon downed the rest of his scotch, leaned back, and said, Fine, set it up. And with that, the game began. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't care, but that was about to change. We're serious, Cole pressed. You survive 1 hour on a blind date with someone totally outside your bubble, and we'll pay for the Monaco trip you keep whining about. Brandon's smirk deepened, but a flicker of interest sparked behind his sunglasses. He loved a challenge. Always had. 1 hour. He repeated, 1 hour. No walking out. No buying her off. Actually listen to her. Fine, Brandon said, tossing back the rest of his drink. I said set it up. Already did, Cole said, flashing his phone screen. We found the perfect girl. He flicked his wrist, sending the screen spinning onto Brandon's lap. A dating app profile was open, a pretty brunette, laughing shyly in a candid photo, with a profile description that screamed, sweet, hardworking, and utterly unimpressed by bullshit. Mia Sullivan, Brandon chuckled low in his throat. You boys are playing dirty. Think of it as community service, Nathan said, grinning. Time you got a taste of the real world, buddy. Brandon leaned his head back, soaking in the sun. An hour. How bad could it be? Across the city, in a cramped apartment above a bustling grocery store, Mia Sullivan stared in disbelief at her phone. You did what? She gasped, clutching the device like it might explode. Her roommate and best friend, Leela Monroe, shrugged unapologetically, tossing a handful of popcorn into her mouth. Relax, honey. It's just one date. You made me a dating profile? Without telling me. She grabbed a fistful of popcorn and launched it across the room. Leela. Technically, Leela said, licking salt from her fingers. I enhanced your social life. Mia groaned, sinking onto the couch. I don't have time for this. Between work and night classes, I'm barely sleeping. Exactly, Leela exclaimed, grabbing Mia's hands dramatically. You need fun. A spark. A break from spreadsheets and frozen peas. I'm studying software engineering, not accounting, Mia mumbled, but the protest was half-hearted. The truth was, she was exhausted. Lonely too, though she'd never admit it. Besides, Leela said, flashing a triumphant grin, he's cute. Look. She flipped her phone around, showing Mia a profile. Brandon L. Dark hair. Sharp jawline. Mischievous eyes. Whoa. Everything about him screamed trouble. Expensive trouble. Leela, Mia said flatly. He looks like he owns 3 yachts and has commitment issues with all of them. It's just one drink. 1 hour. Then you can go back to being a responsible adult. Mia hesitated. 1 hour. What was the worst that could happen? Her phone buzzed. A new message from Brandon, confirming the location. A sleek lounge downtown. She sighed, defeated. Fine, Mia muttered, pushing to her feet. But if I get murdered, I'm haunting you. As Mia rummaged through her closet for something semi-presentable, she ignored the nervous flutter building in her stomach. She had no idea that tonight would be the start of something far messier and far more beautiful than anything she could plan. Mia arrived exactly on time. The lounge was unlike anywhere she'd ever stepped into. Dim gold lighting, hushed jazz playing beneath murmurs of private deals and curated laughter. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting soft shadows over velvet booths and immaculate glassware. She paused at the entrance, inhaling the heady scent of aged bourbon, expensive perfume, and exclusivity. A part of her wanted to turn back. But she straightened her shoulders, tucked her phone into her bag, and walked in like she belonged. The hostess led her to a booth in the corner. Booth 17. She slid into the seat, tugged at the cuff of her white blouse, crossed her ankles beneath the table. Her jeans felt too casual. Her shirt too plain. 10 minutes passed. No sign of him. Her eyes flicked to the door again. Still nothing. She hated waiting. Meanwhile, Brandon Lancaster stepped into the lounge with the casual confidence of a man who'd never waited for anything in his life. He paused just inside the door, removing his coat and offering it to the host without making eye contact. His eyes scanned the room as his internal voice ticked. Let's see. High ponytail, tight dress, stilettos definitely not her. Then he spotted a woman seated alone. Tall, blonde, wearing red lipstick and checking her reflection in her spoon. He almost moved toward her, but no too polished. Too aware. Not someone who would have been signed up for a blind date by her friends. Then, his gaze landed on the woman in booth 17, white blouse. Dark jeans. No makeup he could see. Hair pulled into a loose knot at the nape of her neck. She wasn't trying, which made her stand out. His pace slowed as he approached. Well. Not what I expected. He stopped at the edge of her table. Mia, she looked up. Took him in. His jawline too sharp to be kind. The coat draped over his arm like it had never touched a hanger. Cocky. Controlled. Beautiful. He looks better than his photo. Great. And exactly like someone I'd avoid. Brandon, he said, flashing a smile she could tell had been perfected years ago, each gesture rehearsed and polished until effortless. Mia, she replied simply, meeting his gaze without a flicker of hesitation, her voice smooth, even. He slid into the booth across from her in one fluid motion, resting his forearms lightly on the table, as if settling in for a negotiation, rather than a date. Sorry, Mia, I'm late. Got caught up at work. I noticed, she said, her voice even. Just as Brandon settled into the booth, he noticed two familiar figures entering the lounge and sliding into a table 2 spots away, Nathan and Cole. The moment their eyes met, Brandon knew exactly why they were there, and of course, they didn't wait long to flash a discreet but unmistakable hand signal, one finger raised, the silent reminder of the 1-hour challenge. Cole caught his eye and gave a subtle hand gesture. One finger raised. 1 hour. Brandon's jaw tightened. This was already stupid, but it was tradition. A ridiculous, long-standing game they'd played since prep school. Dares, bets, pranks. Monaco was the prize this time. He didn't care about the trip, but pride was a beast. He turned his attention back to Mia. You're more punctual than most, he said. I have a watch, she replied. And a tendency to keep my word, he chuckled. So, what made you agree to this? I didn't. Oh, he said, tilting his head slightly, curiosity sharpening in his voice. My friends think I work too much. Apparently, this was their intervention, and you went along with it. Let's just say, I'm here. Doesn't mean I'm staying. She reached for her bag as if to leave. Wait, he said, surprising even himself. Please stay. Just for a drink. She paused, watching him carefully, then leaned back against the plush booth and offered a measured nod. 1 drink, she agreed, her voice calm, but with a trace of amusement. The waiter arrived just in time to interrupt the moment, and Brandon gestured without glancing at the menu, ordering an aged bottle of wine with habitual ease. Mia, unfazed, requested a simple glass of water. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Not a wine person? He asked. I like knowing what I'm paying for. She replied, You're not paying. He pointed out, Exactly, she said with a small smirk. making him chuckle not out of charm, but surprise. So what do you do, Brandon? I work in finance. He lied smoothly. Corporate accounting. Boring stuff. She tilted her head, studying him. You don't look like a guy who spends all day with spreadsheets. He gave a noncommittal shrug. What about you? Cashier. Part-time. I also help out in a bookstore some evenings organizing shelves, making tea, listening in on book club debates I'm not invited to, he smiled. And that funds your real life? I'm studying software engineering. That made him pause. Impressive. She sipped her water. You don't look like someone who's easily impressed. I'm not. She didn't smile, but there was a glint in her eyes that suggested satisfaction. But you just were, she pointed out, her tone as precise as the observation itself. Brandon blinked, the corner of his mouth twitching in reluctant acknowledgement. Okay, fair enough. So what kind of software are we talking about here? She leaned slightly forward, her tone shifting into something more focused. Security infrastructure. Systems design. Scalable data structures. I'm mostly into privacy modeling, how to keep user data where it belongs. He raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite himself. That's pretty intense. She gave a small shrug. Not really. It's just logic applied with caution. He tried to sound casual. So how do you feel about all this data scraping these days? AI-driven commerce, behavioral prediction. That kind of thing. She leaned back. Well, she said, if a system can guess what I want before I want it, I should probably want something else. He smiled slowly. That's a great line. It's not a line. It's why I don't shop online. He tilted his head slightly, curiosity lighting behind his eyes. Seriously, he asked, clearly intrigued by her defiance of digital norms. I like stores. I like seeing the person I'm giving money to. I like knowing where my data is, or at least pretending I do. Minimalist, he asked, clearly intrigued. I prefer efficient, she replied with a calm certainty, as if she'd long since stopped explaining that the two weren't the same. He nodded slowly. She was different. So, he said, that sounds like a lot to juggle. Must be exhausting. She looked at him, eyes clear. It's not exhausting when it's something you've chosen, when it's your purpose, your plan. I have goals and I'm building toward them. I'm not just sitting around waiting for life to decide for me. He didn't have a comeback for that. They were just about to order food when a loud laugh burst from the back table. Nathan had tipped his chair, nearly falling. Mia looked past Brandon, then back at him. Friends of yours? He hesitated. Yeah. She stood. Then maybe you should join them. I think I've had enough. He reached for her hand instinctively. Wait. Mia, please. She paused. He sighed. They're childhood friends. This whole thing was a stupid game. A bet. But then you walked an end. I don't know. I didn't expect to want the game to stop. She studied him. Long enough to make him squirm. Okay, she said. But now we play by my rules. He blinked. Meaning, follow me. They left the lounge and walked several blocks, weaving through the cooler night air and the rhythm of a city that never paused. When she finally stopped, it was in front of a food truck parked along the riverbank. She ordered 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, handed over cash, and waved off his wallet when he reached for it. Tonight's on me, she said. They sat on a bench overlooking the water. She handed him his sandwich. You ever eat from a place like this? Not exactly. She took a bite, eyes twinkling. Then you've never really eaten. The first few bites were silent, but not awkward. Then came small talk, the kind that surprised them both. Favorite books, most hated school subjects, how they liked their eggs. the odd things they collected as kids, the songs they pretended not to love. Nothing life-altering, everything revealing. At one point, Brandon asked, "Least favorite food?" "Celery," she said immediately, the word escaping with the kind of certainty that only years of dislike could build. "You?" she added, raising an eyebrow. "Celery," he echoed with a dramatic grimace. "God, finally someone gets it. God, finally someone gets it." She laughed. "I worked in a bistro once. Got fired because the smell of celery made me gag during brunch," he grinned. "My dad forced me to eat it at every dinner. Said I needed to toughen up. I think it ruined me for life." They laughed together. Not politely, not performatively. Real, shoulder-shaking laughter that made the bench feel warmer beneath them. Eventually, the sandwiches were gone. The city buzzed in the background, and time didn't feel as heavy. Mia stood. "I should get going." Brandon stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his chair in the process. "I'll walk you." "No need." She was already waving down a cab. As she opened the door, she turned. "I didn't believe half of what you said tonight," she said. "But the last hour wasn't terrible." She paused, her smile dry but sincere. Underneath all that tailored smugness, "You might actually be a decent person." "It was nice to meet you, Brandon." He stood there as the cab disappeared, realizing something vital had happened, and he'd forgotten to ask for her number. The next morning, Brandon woke with the taste of midnight grilled cheese still lingering and the sound of her laughter etched into his chest. He opened the dating app. Her profile was gone, deleted. Nathan and Cole barged into his apartment with coffee and leftover jokes. "She was cute," Cole said. "Let me guess, you closed the deal." Brandon just smiled, said nothing, and in that silence, he kept her to himself. The scent of burnt coffee and humming servers had become as familiar to Mia Sullivan as grocery aisle chatter once had been. She had traded barcode scanners for back-end code, receipt paper for Python scripts, and she was thriving. Really thriving. Those endless nights balancing Java syntax with frozen pizza and blurry eyes had all been worth it. Mia had graduated at the top of her class from night school, joined a fast-growing startup, then caught the attention of headhunters from one of the country's most prestigious tech divisions. Now, 2 years after that night by the river, the one she'd promised herself she'd forget, Mia walked through the glass doors of Lancaster Enterprises as a new hire. The company name had meant nothing to her at first. A recruiter had handled the interviews. She'd never Googled the executive board. And besides, how could she have known? She stepped into the glossy lobby, badge clipped, laptop bag on one shoulder. Her orientation group huddled beside the elevator, all nervous smiles and tight grips on HR folders. When the elevator chimed and opened to the 42nd floor, they followed the assistant down a long corridor of glass walls and echoing marble. At the end waited a conference room and someone scheduled to speak to them about company culture. At that very moment, the assistant stepped up to the podium, and now, to say a few words, "Please welcome our CEO, Mr. Brandon Lancaster." Mia didn't react at first. She was focused on gathering her papers, unaware of what was coming. But then the voice hit her. Smooth, measured, familiar. She looked up slowly, her breath caught. Brandon stood at the front of the room, dressed in tailored charcoal gray, every bit the commanding executive. But the moment his eyes scanned the room and landed on her, something flickered. A pause so brief most would miss it. Mia froze. Her hand tightened on the folder. The chaos in her mind surged. She had never known his last name. Never knew he was this Brandon Lancaster, and now he was standing less than 15 feet away, speaking about innovation, company culture, and welcoming the new wave of brilliant minds. But his words stumbled slightly. Just a beat. Just long enough. Because Mia was sitting in the front row, and she was looking straight at him. She turned her eyes away quickly, pretending to take notes, pretending her pulse wasn't racing. Brandon, recovering, returned to his speech. But he kept glancing back. Not obviously, but enough. Enough for Mia to feel the weight of it. The orientation ended. The assistant stepped forward again, thanking Brandon and motioning toward a colleague who would now take the group on a tour of the building. Brandon remained behind as the new hires stood and gathered their things. He moved toward the podium, scanning the printed roster of names left on the table. His eyes ran down the list, and then he saw it. Mia Sullivan, a name he never got. He looked up just in time to see her heading for the door with the rest of the group. Miss Sullivan? Mia halted. She didn't turn around right away. Her hand hovered over the doorframe, her back stiff. "Could I have a moment?" he asked, his tone softer now. Measured. Sincere. She turned slowly. Everyone else had filtered out. They were alone. He stepped forward, closing the distance with the quiet confidence he always carried. But this time, there was something else underneath. A hesitation. A flicker of something unguarded. He extended his hand. Brandon Lancester. "Welcome to the company. It's very good to see you again." She took his hand briefly, then let go. "You look a lot like an accountant I met once," she said, her smile polite, but edged with irony. Strange coincidence. He smiled, a little stunned by the moment. She turned toward the hallway. "I should catch up with the group," and just like that, she was gone, leaving Brandon standing alone in the center of the room. A quiet smile forming on his lips. He had just found the girl he didn't know he'd been searching for. A week after orientation, Mia received an email with no subject line. Just a time and a floor number. Thursday. 2:00 p.m. floor 51. There was no sender name, no context. Only that familiar tightness in her chest and the sharp memory of a voice she couldn't shake. The 51st floor was executive. No one from her department had any business up there, especially not a junior engineer, barely into her first project cycle. Still, when Thursday came, she went. The elevator opened into a silent hallway of glass, wood, and power. No buzzing teams. No clutter. Just thick carpets, modern art, and the subtle scent of control. The receptionist gestured without a word. "He's waiting." Brandon stood at the far end of the conference room, back to her, eyes on the skyline like he owned it. Which, in a way, he did. Mia cleared her throat. "You asked to see me?" He turned slowly. No suit jacket today. Shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked less like the CEO of a tech empire and more like the guy from the bench, the one who offered her Paris and ended up alone. "I did," he said. "Come in." Close the door. Mia stepped inside but didn't sit. Her arms stayed folded. "You remember," she said plainly. Brandon's mouth curved slightly. "You think I forgot? You never knew my last name." "I do now." She didn't reply. He motioned to the seat across from him. "Sit." "Please." Reluctantly, she did. A long pause hung between them. Then Brandon leaned forward. "I read your initial code submission. The patch you suggested for the security backend. It's better than what we've been running for months." Mia raised a brow. "So this is a performance review?" "It's an acknowledgement," he said simply. "You're good, Mia. Really good." She swallowed. Praise was praise, but from him, it felt layered. He continued. "I wanted to be the one to tell you that you've been reassigned." Her stomach tightened. "Reassigned to the CTO direct team. Effective immediately." Mia blinked. I don't understand." "You're not just some new hire, Mia." What you just did. It caught my father's attention. That made her go still. Your father, she echoed. The chairman? Brandon nodded. He's impressed. And when he's impressed, things move fast. Mia leaned back, realization dawning. She hadn't just solved a code problem. She'd outshined someone, and that someone might have been Brandon himself. You're not thrilled, she said. Brandon didn't deny it. You're here because you're brilliant. But yeah, it stings a little. Silence. Then Mia stood. I didn't mean to step on anyone's toes, she said. Least of all yours. Brandon looked up. You didn't. You just reminded me what it feels like to be outpaced. And honestly, I needed that. Their eyes held. Something shifted. Not attraction. Not resentment. Something quieter. Mutual recognition. She turned to leave. He called out, voice lower now. Mia, she paused. You belong here. She nodded once, not turning back, and for the first time since that night, Brandon didn't feel like he was watching her walk away. He felt like something had just begun. Brandon had barely returned to his office when the message popped up: boardroom. 15 minutes, urgent, and part of him groaned, because he knew exactly what this was about. The new data modeling system that had been dragging in committee for weeks. But the other part, the part still echoing with the way Mia had looked at him before leaving, that part didn't care about boardrooms or projections or even his father's looming expectations. All he could see was her face, not turning back, and still somehow staying. And 15 minutes later, Brandon walked into the conference room with every intention to focus. But there she was again, Mia Sullivan, already seated, already unfolding a sleek report binder that wasn't part of anyone's prep material. And for a second, he actually forgot the password to his laptop. Because when had she had time to prepare that? When had she even gotten access to the raw test data? And then his father walked in, Mr. Lancester, with that same calculating look he always wore to every meeting, and the room fell quiet. Mia stood to present, her voice calm, but with a current underneath, like she was daring someone to challenge her logic. She walked them through a streamlined infrastructure for the AI deployment model, pointing out risks the original team had overlooked, redundancies that no one else had flagged. And Brandon watched his father nod, more than once, even lean in. And something inside Brandon tensed because he knew that nod. He'd spent a lifetime chasing that nod, and now here, it was being handed to Mia like it was nothing. When the meeting ended, people were murmuring things like brilliant and fast-tracked, and how did we not catch that? And Brandon stayed back, pretending to scroll through something important as he watched Mia close her binder with that same calm efficiency, like she hadn't just made half the room feel like amateurs. And just as she walked past, he said, Mia, not loud, but enough, and she turned slightly, not fully, just enough for him to see the ghost of a smile tugging at her mouth. Later that day, his father called Brandon into his office, the heavy kind of summon that meant a shift was coming, and Brandon was halfway through forming excuses when his father simply said, I want her on your team. That smart girl, Mia Sullivan, make it happen. And for a second, Brandon didn't know whether he was relieved or blindsided, or maybe both, because working directly with Mia, the girl who once ordered grilled cheese like it was a power move, was something he hadn't prepared for. So the next morning, when Mia stepped into the 11th floor, now officially part of Brandon's project unit, he wasn't surprised to feel everyone's eyes on her, half curious, half suspicious, because nobody got promoted that fast, not without connections or skeletons. And there were whispers, of course there were, and Brandon caught one of his team leads say, she's either a genius or someone's girlfriend, and Brandon almost responded, but didn't because part of him didn't know what to say. It was only a week into working together when Mia knocked on his glass wall, not really asking permission, just walking in with 3 color-coded files and an eyebrow already raised. "Brandon, this schedule is insane," she said without apology. "If you want results that don't crash the system, we need to rework the deliverables." And instead of pushing back, instead of pulling rank, Brandon sat back and let her talk, because the truth was, she was right. But something shifted later that week. The night they both stayed late for a system simulation, and the building was half dark, and she looked up from her screen, hair messy, sleeves rolled, and said, "So this is what you meant by finance, right?" Brandon, spreadsheets and all, and he smiled. Couldn't help it, because they both knew the game was up. She'd known all along. And then she said, "I didn't buy it that night, but I played along because you seemed more interesting than your lies." Brandon laughed, one of those real, startled laughs he didn't give easily. And then their eyes met and something buzzed in the air that felt old and new and fragile all at once. He didn't say anything then, didn't cross the line, not yet. But that night, as he walked out of the office into the chilled New York air, he knew something was going to unravel, and soon. Mia didn't sleep that night, not really. Not with Brandon's words echoing in her mind, "You belong here." And the thing is, she hadn't felt like she belonged anywhere for so long, not in the grocery store with price tags and fluorescent lights, not even in her coding classes where everyone spoke in algorithms and caffeine. But something about the way he said it, like it wasn't just about the job or the project or even the promotion, but about her, like he saw something solid in her, when she still felt like she was rebuilding from shards and coffee stains. So she showed up the next morning at 8 sharp with her hair pulled into a loose bun that she tried to make look professional, and her badge half tucked into her blazer and her laptop under her arm like armor. But of course, things couldn't stay simple, no, not when 2 hours into the day she got pulled into a last-minute innovation pitch, because apparently someone from executive board was visiting early and Jessica from UX was out sick, and somehow Mia was now the lead on the privacy model update. And she could already hear Brandon's voice in her head saying, "You got this," and also probably making some annoying smirk as he leaned back in his chair, being all Brandon Y and calm while her brain was trying to hold in a scream. She walked into the boardroom and it was all leather chairs and filtered water and expensive silence, and there was Brandon at the far end scrolling something on his tablet until he looked up and did a full double take, like he wasn't expecting her there, which made no sense. Because she was literally the one presenting, but whatever, and she started the pitch, and she talked fast to fast, but somehow it worked because Brandon didn't interrupt once, and Mr. Lancaster Sr. was there too, which she did not know until halfway through when she saw the name placard, and nearly choked on her own breath. Of course, the twist came later because that evening, as everyone filtered out, she got an email CC'd to half the company. Brandon's father had personally appointed her to lead the pilot rollout for their next cybersecurity vertical, which sounded amazing until you realized it was the exact same project Brandon had been grooming as his own baby for 6 months. Now she was being asked to lead it, not assist, not contribute, lead, and the air in her office suddenly felt tight. So she did something she hated. She went to his office, not with a speech, not even with an apology ready, just stood in the doorway, clutching the folder like it could protect her from the way Brandon looked up, and paused mid-sentence like his mind had just slammed into a wall, and Mia swore she could hear his breath catch, or maybe that was hers. She said softly, "Hey, can we talk?" and instantly hated how small her voice sounded, like she was 10 years old again, trying to explain to her math teacher why she hadn't done the homework, except this wasn't about numbers, it was about something she couldn't even name. Brandon leaned back in his chair slowly, not saying anything for a second, which made her panic spiral even faster, until he said, "So, are you here as my strategist or as the woman who just demolished my proposal in front of my father?" Her throat burned. She tried to laugh it off halfway. I didn't mean to demolish anything, it just came up during the brief, and your father asked and Brandon cut in. Mia, you're right, I've been too close to this, and the board saw it too. But what I didn't expect was for you to walk out like that. No explanation, no follow-up, you just left. I know I should have said something, she mumbled, and I just thought maybe I'd made things worse. Maybe I should have kept quiet. He stood now, not angry, just intense, like every word cost him something, and said, you didn't make things worse, you did what I couldn't. And my father noticed. He wants you to lead the new initiative, Mia, not me. And I told him if anyone should. It's you. She blinked. What? But you? Brandon smiled. Yeah, well, apparently I've got a knack for building things until they get real. And then I hide behind job titles and legacy and PowerPoints. She stepped in, finally closing the door behind her, and the silence felt like velvet, heavy and thick. Brandon. I'm really sorry. She tossed her hair back thoughtfully. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Brandon started to talk as he went with heavy steps towards Mia. You didn't. You impressed me. And that's the problem, Mia, because now I can't stop seeing you as more than the girl who once made fun of my accountant lie over grilled cheese sandwiches. And her heart kicked against her ribs, because this wasn't the plan. Not now. Not when everything was finally starting to make sense. He looked at her like he was deciding whether to kiss her or fire her, or maybe both. Brandon was one step closer to her now. So, what now, Mia? He leaned his hand on the wall next to her. You lead the project, and we pretend none of this matters, or do we stop pretending? She didn't know how to answer, not with the way he was standing so close, not with the memory of that night flickering behind his eyes and hers. I think I should lead it, she said. Because it matters, but that doesn't mean I can pretend it doesn't feel complicated. He nodded just once, like that hurt more than if she'd yelled, and said, well then, lead it. I'll try not to get in your way. But his voice cracked just enough at the end that she didn't believe a word of it. Mia turned toward the door, about to leave. All right then, Brandon. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. It's getting late. Brandon was silent for a moment. His eyes had landed almost involuntarily on the messy strands of hair falling down the back of Mia's neck, on the curves of her silhouette as she moved away, and for a second, everything felt like a slow-motion scene from a movie. Since the moment Mia had stepped into the room, the subtle trace of her perfume, one he'd tried to ignore, had begun to swirl in his head. And suddenly, Brandon felt like he was losing control. In a sudden, impulsive reflex, he reached out and grabbed Mia's arm. He pulled her toward him, firmly, maybe even a little too firmly, and pressed her against the wall. Mia found herself caught between the cold wall and the heat of Brandon's body, barely any space to breathe. His lips crashed onto hers, and she felt his breath steal into her own. The files Mia had been holding scattered to the floor. Her now empty hands instinctively landed on Brandon's chest. Later, Mia would try to convince herself she only did that to push him away. But in that moment, she couldn't. She just couldn't. All she could feel was her skin igniting, the scent of his body, the warmth of his breath, and her knees gave way a little. Whether the kiss lasted a few seconds or several minutes, Mia couldn't tell. The only thing she remembered clearly was that before letting herself get completely swept away, she wriggled free from Brandon's grasp. He didn't stop her. He just stood there, still facing the wall, saying nothing. Mia knelt down quickly, collecting a few of the scattered documents. Without saying a word, she bolted out of the room. Brandon remained still, one hand on the wall, the other raking through his hair as he stared out the window, thinking, God, what the hell was that? How did I go from being furious with her to doing that? It started with the sound of the car door clicking open. Brandon stepped out in that effortless way he always did, the valet rushing to greet him as he moved around the sleek black Aston Martin and opened the passenger side. And that's when every head on the sidewalk turned. Because the woman stepping out looked like something from a magazine cover. Long legs, golden hair cascading down her back, a dress that shimmered with every move, and eyes that scanned the entrance with cool precision. Her name was Chloe, 24, a model with more runway miles than Brandon could count, and honestly, he wasn't even listening to her recap of her last show, not really. She was saying something about how two other models sabotaged her heels backstage, and how she still walked like a goddess anyway. And Brandon just smiled, nodded, pretended to be present while his mind kept showing him flashes. A hallway, a gasp, Mia's fingers brushing his jaw. The way she looked at him, like she was torn between slapping him and kissing him again. And God, how did she smell that good while being that mad? He blinked as Chloe sipped her wine and asked if he'd heard what she said. And he just leaned in, kissed her cheek lightly, and whispered something like, "Sweetie, I have to run. Emergency came up. You stay and call the girls. Enjoy the night." And she barely had time to react before he was gone. The next few days were strange. Mia stayed behind her computer like it was a shield. Brandon stuck to scheduled meetings like they were life support. And no one said anything about that night. But the tension was sharp. And it only got worse when Brandon's friends showed up. Loud and annoying and too observant for their own good. Like always, tossing their jackets onto the chairs and cracking jokes like they owned the place. Cole leaned in with that annoying smirk and said, "So Bran, who's the new girl in Dev Branch? Tall, hazel eyes, kinda intimidating, but in a hot way. She's a 10-man. Wait, what's her name again?" Brandon barely looked up from his laptop, just muttered something like, "Just started this week. No big deal." But another friend, the one who always ran his mouth, laughed and said, "No big deal, huh? She kinda looks like the chick from the diner, remember? The one our challenge girl, the one we dared you to seduce." Brandon froze, literally paused mid-keystroke. His stomach dropped because just then Mia was walking by behind them with a folder in her arms and her head down. But they didn't notice. They just kept talking. "Bran, really? What was her name? I swear it's the same girl. Didn't she work in a grocery store or something?" Cole broke out loudly. "Wasn't she that? What did you call it? 1-hour charity case? I mean, come on, Brandon. You disappeared with her and came back looking like you'd run a triathlon. None of us bought the whole innocent coffee date story, by the way." Brandon stood up so fast, his chair slammed into the wall. The sound made everyone jump, but he didn't care. He pushed past the desk and bolted for the hallway, yelling, "Mia, wait. Mia." But she didn't even look back. She was already near the elevator. She hit the button with shaking hands, nothing. So she took the stairs, and by the time Brandon reached the lobby, she was gone, just gone, like smoke, like she'd never been there. And he pulled out his phone, dialed her number and waited. 1 ring, 2 rings, 5, no answer, voicemail. When he walked back into the office, his friends were laughing awkwardly, trying to play it off, like, "Relax, dude. We didn't mean anything." And that same loudmouth said, "Come on, man, if you're gonna fall for a girl, at least don't make it the one we dared you to impress." And before anyone could blink, Brandon's fist connected with Nathan's jaw. The room went silent, except for the guy groaning on the floor holding his face. Cole whispered, "Holy shit, Brandon. What the hell, man? Are you in love with her or something?" And Brandon didn't answer, didn't sit down, just stood there breathing hard, hands still clenched, knuckles red, looking like the answer scared him more than the question ever could. It was 3 a.m., and Brandon hadn't slept a minute. He stood in front of the glass wall of his 52nd floor penthouse, a half-full glass of whiskey in his hand, the city below glowing like it didn't know what regret was. And yet all Brandon could see was the sharp line of Mia's jaw, the way her eyes had flashed, the way she had looked at him right before walking away. God, that look had cut deeper than any slap, and even now it wouldn't leave his mind. Not for a second. Her voice, her scent, the taste of her lips still burning like a brand on his skin. He'd called her, of course he had, but she didn't pick up, not once, and in a moment of weakness, he'd pulled her file from HR and stared at the address for 20 full minutes, fingers twitching, but he didn't go, couldn't go. Because what the hell would he even say? Sorry I let my friends talk about you like you're nothing. Sorry I let you think I used you. Sorry I didn't say no when I should have screamed it. He took a sip of the whiskey, let it burn, tilted his head back against the cold glass, and whispered to himself, God damn it, Brandon, you idiot. You finally fell in love, and it's with the one woman who made you feel like losing her was worse than losing everything else combined. He walked into the office the next morning like a man walking into a battlefield, eyes scanning every desk, every corridor, hoping to catch even a glimpse of her. He hadn't even realized how much space Mia had occupied until she wasn't there anymore, not just at the office, but in his mind and his breath. As he passed reception, he barked without thinking, Jenny, tell Mia Sullivan to come to my office now. But Jenny stood up slowly, hesitant, her voice soft, Mr. Lancaster. Mia came in early this morning. She left a letter for you. And her badge. She said she was resigning. For a second, he didn't react, face unreadable, just nodded and walked into his office, closed the door behind him, like it weighed 100 pounds, then walked to his desk where the envelope lay waiting like it knew exactly what it was about to do to him. He picked it up, stared at it for 5 full seconds, then tore it open, and the words inside were short but lethal. Brandon, this company was a huge opportunity for me. I'm grateful to your father and to you for believing in me. But I can't work with you anymore. I can't even be in the same building. Goodbye. Mia. Mia slammed the coffee mug down on the counter. A few drops splashed onto the carpet, but Mia didn't care, because the anger inside her felt like it was about to explode. The emptiness of quitting her job mixed with the chaos Brandon had caused in her head. And it all sat like a knot in her chest that hadn't loosened in days. Everything felt like it was crashing down at once. Leela and the others were supposed to come over any minute, but Mia couldn't even pull herself together. So when the doorbell rang, she opened it, and Leela walked in, giving her a quick once-over before asking, So what did he do, Mia? Because your face says angry, but also something else. And that something else was clear as day, because Mia had been replaying that night in her head on an endless loop. Brandon's lips, his hands, his voice, that look in his eyes, all of it, every second burned into her skin. But under all of that was the ache, the kind that comes from a pattern you can't break, because every time Mia started to soften toward Brandon, every time she let herself believe maybe he was different, he'd find a way to flip the script and leave her reeling. Leela curled up on the couch and said it straight, Mia, I think he's in love with you, and I think you feel something too, but you keep running from it. Mia looked away, couldn't answer, because there was nothing to say, just the need to run. A few hours later, she was scrolling through flight options, and her fingers paused when she saw at Greensboro, North Carolina, the small town where she grew up, a warm house with creaky floors and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. A father who looked tough but melted at her tears. A mother who saw everything even behind her thick glasses. Mia didn't think long. She booked the ticket. The next day, she packed a small suitcase, didn't sleep on the plane, just stared out the window at the skyline of her old neighborhood. And when she knocked on the door, her mom opened it with no questions. Just tears and a hug and a welcome home baby that made her heart crack all over again. Her father stood a few steps back, just nodding, but his eyes gave him away. Her childhood bedroom was exactly the same, and when she lay down on that bed and cried It wasn't just from exhaustion or heartbreak. It was the quiet realization that maybe not everything could be fixed. Late that night, her dad knocked gently, came in and sat beside her, didn't speak right away, just looked at his hands and finally said, "I don't know what happened, but I can tell you're thinking about a man, so let me tell you this. If he really loves you, he'll find you, no matter where you are, because a man who truly loves will tear down every wall to reach you. Don't forget that." And right then, hundreds of miles away, Brandon stepped out of his private car and looked around a town he'd never seen before. Watching the streets roll past the window, he thought, so this is where she grew up, where she walked, went to school, laughed. And something inside him shifted, not nerves exactly, more like a weight in his chest he couldn't name. When he'd told his father he was going to get Mia, the old man, hard-faced, intimidating, had actually smiled. "Then don't be late. Bring her home," he'd said. And now the car pulled up in front of a small white house with a porch and flower pots that were half wilted, but still brave. Brandon's hand shook a little when he knocked, and when the kind-eyed woman opened the door with a curious smile, he cleared his throat and said, "I'm her boss, or I was maybe her friend. Honestly, I don't know what I am right now, but I know that I love her." Inside, he couldn't help but look around, drawn to the photos on the walls, a little Mia grinning, another of her holding up a trophy, a younger version of her beside a robot made of scrap parts, and he whispered under his breath, "Mia, you're always different." Brandon suddenly realized how little he knew and how much he wanted to know everything. Mia stood there quietly, arms crossed against her chest, watching Brandon with guarded eyes as he stared at the photo wall like it was some kind of museum, like he could piece her together from childhood smiles and faded awards. And when she finally spoke, her voice was low, sharp, cutting through the silence like glass. "How did you find me, Brandon? What are you doing here?" He turned slowly, hands slightly raised, not in surrender, but something close, and his mouth opened and closed. "Mia, before anything came out, I didn't come here to ask for anything. Not really, I needed to say some things I should have said a long time ago." Mia didn't answer, didn't move, just waited. Brandon stepped closer slowly, like every inch was a test. "I never told them we slept together 2 years ago. I swear I never said anything, but they assumed. They always assume, and I didn't correct them. That's on me, and after that hour with you, I tried to find you, Mia. I really did, but I didn't even know your last name." His voice cracked slightly, and he looked down. "I thought about you more than I'd admit to anyone, including myself. And this week, this job, the resignation, I just wanted you to know the company doesn't want to lose you. And if it's me, if I'm the problem, then I'll leave the room every time you enter. We'll never have to speak again if that's what it takes. But I didn't want it to end like this, not like this, Mia. Please." Mia took a deep breath, jaw tight, eyes blinking a little too fast, like she was trying not to let the words land. "So, you came all this way for work," she said, voice shaking. "To offer me a desk and a paycheck." Brandon stepped back, stunned. "No. I mean, yes, I want you to come back, but it's not about work. Mia, I just didn't know how else to fix this." Mia shook her head, and for a second something flickered in her eyes. Anger, sadness, maybe even disappointment, and she said, "Well, you won't fix it, Brandon, because I'm not coming back, and you're going to leave here with nothing." She turned sharply, disappeared down the hallway, her door closing a second later with a dull click. Brandon stood frozen, throat tight, mind racing, heart heavier than it had ever been, and just as he reached for the front door, a voice came from behind him. Soft, steady, fatherly. "Son, she'll head out for a walk in a few minutes. If you want to see her again, wait at the park on the corner. She always goes there when she needs to clear her head." The park was quiet in that small town kind of way, the kind of silence that had its own weight, where the wind moved through the trees like it knew secrets it wouldn't tell, and Brandon sat on a swing, in a perfectly tailored coat that suddenly felt too tight, wondering how the hell he went from penthouse meetings and boardroom wars to this a swing set in Greensboro, North Carolina, waiting like some lost boy hoping the girl would just show up. He didn't even realize he was holding his breath until he saw her, Mia, walking slowly, her hands stuffed in her coat pockets, eyes red like she'd been crying, but chin lifted like she wouldn't let the world see her break. And when she saw him, she stopped cold, like her feet forgot how to move. Brandon stood, heart pounding like it was trying to break free, but he didn't say anything, not at first. Just let the silence speak for him until Mia found her voice. "Why are you here, Brandon? Why didn't you just leave like you always do? Why didn't you get back in your car and drive off to your perfect city and your perfect life?" And Brandon stepped closer, just enough so she could see he wasn't here to play the old games. "Because I can't, because I haven't slept since you left, because you're in my head and under my skin, and I don't even recognize myself when you're not around, and I don't want to." He reached into his pocket and pulled out her resignation note, the edges folded like it had been read 100 times. "You handed this to me like it was nothing, but to me, Mia, you're everything before I even knew it. 2 years ago, that night, I met a girl I didn't expect. You were smart, honest, kind in a way that caught me off guard. And when you showed up again, just walked into that conference room like a storm that had waited 2 years to land, something in me just woke up. I started caring about my work, showing up on time, thinking about every project you touched just to have an excuse to be near you. And yeah, I hated when you proved me wrong in front of my father, but even that made me respect you more. I tried to fight it. God, I really did. But even my anger couldn't get rid of this thing I felt. This pull toward you that never stopped growing. I didn't know it then, but now I do. You changed me, Mia, and I can't go back to being that guy I used to be. Not after knowing what it feels like to want something real, to want you, and now. The thought of not seeing you again, it doesn't feel like something I can survive." Mia didn't say anything, just stood there blinking, hands trembling, because her whole body felt like it was on fire. And then Brandon added, "If you tell me to go, I will. If you say this is the end, I'll believe you, but I'll still wait here. Every day if I have to, until you're ready to say something else. I'm in love with you, and I won't give up on you." And that was it. That was the moment the silence stretched between them, like a wire pulled too tight, until Mia took one step forward, then another, and then she was in his arms, fists against his chest, not pushing him away, but grounding herself. And he held her like he'd never let go again, because he wouldn't. And after what felt like a lifetime in a single heartbeat, Mia finally whispered into the space between them, "I was scared, Brandon. That night, 2 years ago, I felt something real. I looked at you, and I didn't just see some cocky guy walking into a bet. I saw someone who could make me forget all the walls I built to survive. And that terrified me, because being with someone like you meant dropping all my armor. But now I see who you really are, and I'm not running anymore." Brandon didn't say a word. He just looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that ever made sense. And when he leaned in, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was everything that had been building for years, for lifetimes. For all the moments they thought they'd lost each other. Their lips met in a kiss that wasn't just about love. It was about trust rebuilt, wounds mended, a promise made without words. And in that quiet park, under the fading light of a new beginning, they took their first step into a future neither of them ever expected, but both of them had been waiting for all along. Did you like Mia and Brandon's story? If you were in Mia's shoes, what would you have done? Please drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Thank you for watching.